All right, good morning. We are going to begin with the opening moves of World War II, and I just want to make sure that you get the essential notes that you need, just the beginning phases of the war, and we'll take the war in sort of phases, all right, until we finish it. So keep up, pay attention, and let's see what we have here. So we're looking at the years between 1939 to 1940, all right. So we know that Poland was invaded. That was September 1st, 1939. And first, Hitler took over the Lithuanian port of Memel, which of course was largely populated by Germany. Then, of course, he wanted the return of Danzig and the Polish corridor. Now, those are very two significant key pieces of land. Now, Danzig um, and there was a free port city which contained a lot of Germans, and then the Polish corridor. Remember, that's a little strip of water. All right, that sort of Poland occupied when Poland was created after World War One. Now he wanted a railway system that was going to link East Prussia to the rest of Germany. So he wanted that railway system to go across that Polish corridor. Of course, many thought this wasn't unreasonable. All right, and it was coming right after Germany seized the seizure of Czechoslovakia. So um, the Poles were convinced that the German demands were only preliminary to an invasion. So if Poland gave in to Germany, they knew that, hey, this was just the first step into Hitler taking over. So this was very significant. All right. So we remember that Hitler did sign that non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. All right. And of course, part of that pact, the secret agreement, was that they would divide Poland between each other. All right. So we know that they wouldn't attack each other. All right. And they would divide Poland. Now, he did believe that with Russia neutral, Britain and France would not risk intervention. All right. So Britain is going to ratify the guarantee to Poland, meaning that um, if someone was to invade or if a country was to invade, then Britain would come to its defense. Of course, Hitler blew it off because the pattern that we've seen here throughout this whole interwar period and beginning of the war is the fact that we were going to appease him, we were going to give in to his demands to avoid a war. But at this point, many people saw war as inevitable. All right. Of course, the Poles refused to negotiate because they had the Britain guarantee, and the funny thing about this is that Chamberlain still negotiated, all right, with Germany. He even sent another um, ultimatum saying that, hey, we can hold a conference and we can hear your grievances. But this time Hitler just didn't respond, just didn't flat out respond, because we know there was a 2-day gap between the invasion of Poland and the actual day that Britain actually declared war on Germany. So when Hitler didn't respond to that ultimatum on September 3rd at 11, Britain, of course, was at war. And then, of course, shortly thereafter, France is going to declare war. All right. So, actually, who's to blame? I mean, there are a lot of theories, a lot of historians who cite many different reasons as what was to blame for this war. The causes, I would say, not as complicated as that of World War One, but yet and still, there are many factors and variables to play. The Versailles Treaty. All right. Of course, we know that the harsh treatment of Germany and the unfair settlement of that treaty put a lot of resentment and bitterness, and a lot of Germans desired, they wanted revenge. All right. Also, the League of Nations, the failure of the League of Nations, and this whole idea of collective security, all right, been criticized, and of course, the failure of this whole general disarmament failed also. And then, of course, you got to look at the Great Depression and that world economic crisis that was going on. Many historians do cite the fact that Hitler would not necessarily have come to power without there being this financial crisis, all right, because he would not have had any fears to feed off on. All right. But then you put everything in retrospect. By 1938, a lot of the German grievances were met. So we had the reparations had been canceled. The disarmament clause, of course, had totally been ignored. That was dating back as far as the Treaty of Apollo. Rhineland was demilitarized. All right. Austria and Germany were, of course, reunited, and then a lot of the Germans that were living in other territories, they were brought into the Reich from from Czechoslovakia. All right, so what really is to blame? All right, appeasement, of course, we know there are many arguments that appeasement was probably one of the main factors of this war. And um, if Britain and France had taken sort of a firm stance or a hardline approach with Germany, Germany wouldn't have been able to become so strong and powerful because it would have seen the other world powers as a threat. All right, and they didn't want to provoke a war too soon. All right, and of course the Soviet Union. Many say by signing the non-aggression pact, that was sort of the last straw. All right, um, to give Germany the notion to proceed. All right, into Poland. All right, because then um, it wouldn't have been an issue, all right, if whether or not the Soviet Union would attack. All right, Stalin had allied with the West and with Poland. It could have frightened Hitler into keeping the peace. And then Britain and Poland were reluctant to ally, of course, with the USSR, the Soviet Union, because of the communist government. So that fear of communism got in the way. So was Hitler solely to blame, or do we really see this as a complex issue of different causes that allowed Hitler to sort of proceed? All right, so we remember you're assessing the short and the long-term causes, so keep that in mind. All right, the First World War, the Second World War was a war of rapid movement. All right, so it wasn't a lot of stalemate, wasn't a lot of fighting in trenches as we see with World War One. We had pretty much a lot of different scenes that were taking place in the Pacific and the Far East and North Africa and even into Russia. So we see a lot of different theaters of war here. All right, of course, we look at the Axis powers, who are going to come to include Germany, Italy, Japan, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria, and the Allied powers, which included, but were not limited to, there were others: U.S., Britain, France, Canada, Soviet Union, eventually Australia, Belgium, Brazil, so forth and so on. All right, so we know that Poland was defeated. All right, and it was one of the German military tactics, Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, which fast, rapid movement. Think about a football team, an all-out blitz where everyone's going to rush the quarterback very quickly. So we're looking at rapid thrust of these motorized tanks, and then of course the German Air Force, or the Luftwaffe. One of the key characteristics that sort of helped them defeat Poland so quickly within a matter of days was the Polish railway system was knocked out by the superior German Air Force. All right, and the British and French, of course, didn't have a lot of time to really get mobilized and defend Poland. The French mobilization was slow, and of course, it was out of date. It wasn't up to par with Germany. Isn't that ironic? All right, but it was difficult to transport sufficient troops to Poland very effectively. And by the 29th of September, so we're looking at a matter of 26 days, Poland was defeated and divided between Germany and the Soviet Union, as agreed, of course, in that non-aggression pact that was signed in 1939. All right, and so the next few months, we call it the Phoney War, all right, which very little happened in the West, for the next 5 months. All right, Russia is going to continue to seize lands in the Baltic states, so Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and invaded Finland. All right, and the French and Germans, of course, they had their own defensive lines in the West, just like the defensive line was drawn with the trenches, so to speak. In World War I, World War II, the Maginot and the Siegfried lines, all right, were the defensive lines. And basically, Hitler paused without seeking any other territory or any further advancements. And he thought this weekend resolve would sort of, Britain and France would encourage negotiate peace. And of course, this also helped Germany because the generals felt that they weren't quite ready to attack the West. They needed some more time to mobilize. So the Americans, of course, are going to call this a phony war because nothing was happening. All right. So there you see the defensive lines, so to speak. All right, the strong fortifications in the solid red line, and then the dotted red lines, you see the weak fortifications. All right. And then this is the Siegfried line, German border. All right. So Hitler's troops occupied Denmark in April of 1940, and of course this ended this whole time period of the Phoney War, and they arrived a few days later. They were unable to dislodge the Germans, who were already well established. All right. Now, one of the things that Hitler sort of advocated for and pursued was the fact that the Norway, controlling Norway, which he believed was very important for Germans, and the outlet for the Swedish iron ore. And of course, this was very, very important to German armament, all right, and stocking the military with the supplies it needed to pursue this war, all right. And of course, this Norwegian campaign, or occupying Norway, Germany was assured her bases and her iron ore supplies, and it also showed that Chamberlain, who was the prime minister, was sort of incompetent, so to speak, because the British troops were slow to mobilize. They were slow to sort of ward off this invasion of Norway, and Hitler was able to go in, take it over very easily without a lot of fight from the British. And they actually retreated. And after that, Winston Churchill is going to become prime minister, and he's the key person that you want to associate with the duration of World War II. All right, you know, the causes was Chamberlain, but now we want to look at the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. All right, so there you have it, my friends. These were just the opening moves of World War II, and we'll continue on and take it into chunks. All right,